As fantasy fiction readers, we are always thinking about how our favourite series and books are going to be adapted. How are they going to look on the big screen? How is that soundtrack going to bring to life some of those favourite moments from when we first flick through those pages? A lot of the time when I'm reading, I put on a fantasy music playlist just to get me into the zone and just to enhance the experience a little bit. But whatever the secret sauce these music soundtracks have for their movie counterparts, I can't quite get that when I'm reading. There's always something missing. Well, the team at the Black Piper thought about this problem and they made a full-blown book soundtrack to one of my favourite books of all time, The Way of Kings, book 1 in the Stormlight Archive. These guys put together a group of Hollywood professionals, some of which who have performed on the biggest movie soundtracks of all time, and they created an epic, beautiful and moving soundtrack named Caladan. A few weeks ago I was able to sit down with them and talk about the process of how they formed this awesome company and how they made the album Caladan. We go through how they broke down 1,000 pages into musical terms and adapted some of the most iconic scenes in fantasy. We talk about the recording process, the reception, and what they're working on next in this video. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy this look inside the Black Piper and the album Caladan. Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Christian from Lost in Discovery, and I'm here with two of the key members of the Black Piper. I'm with Sae Sae Norris, the producer and creative director of the team, and I'm with Michael Barmiller, the producer and lead composer. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you.
Hey, it's great to be here with you. Thanks for inviting us on.
I think we should just start at the beginning, the origin story, and I just basically wanted to ask the role you guys both played in sort of forming the Black Piper and how you met and how this sort of company became what it is today.
I was just getting out of university and I was thinking I should create some kind of demo that I could take to Hollywood because I had just finished a degree in media music. And the idea was to go down to LA and integrate into the Hollywood scene and be, you know, a big time film composer. So in order to do that, you gotta have something you can take and say, this is me. So originally it was all about a demo. And I had a friend, Richard Williams, and you know, he'd done a little bit more recording with orchestras than I had. I'd done, you know, the requisite amount for the degree, but he'd worked a little bit more with orchestras, and he was a friend, and I thought, hey, let's get together and do this. And so I approached him. I said, hey, I want to do this thing, and you know, I want to record overseas. I want to put together a choir, and you know, do the whole shebang. He was like, sweet, let's do it. But I didn't have, you know, the experience as like a record producer. Right at that time, I hadn't made an album before, and so I started looking around for a producer. I started asking some friends, you know, in the know, hey, do you know anybody that could act as a producer? Now, I never qualified the term producer. You know, in my mind, I was looking for somebody to help make an album, right? A record producer. Well, I contacted my friend Nate Drew, who was at the time the head of the Salt Lake Pops. You know, asked him, who do you know? And he's like, well, I've got the perfect person for you. Enter Sae Sae. Well, I didn't know at the time that you know, Sae Sae was a film producer. I didn't even really have the concept, you know, like that it was going to be much of a difference, right? Like producers are producers, somebody that makes stuff.
We do make stuff.
So I'm like, great. Let's get in contact with her. So we did, and Richard and I and Sae Sae all met together.
Our first time was at Starbucks over at Barnes & Noble. Our second time where we like mapped things out was at this little hole in the wall. Yeah, it was a sandwich shop. Was where it like was born.
Yeah, so all great ideas start in the sandwich shop.
Yeah, it's not even in business anymore. Thank goodness. So, from my perspective, I come from Hollywood and the film world, and while I'm based in Utah, I've been flown out to LA to do like script doctoring and just general work, but I live here. And while I'm here, I helped open a $600 million studio and it's very cliquish, the film industry. So I created a nonprofit for women, but that ironically helped erase some of those niches and allowed everybody to kind of network. And I was good at, hey, you and you should work together, you and you should work together, and you and you should work together, and we'll all take over when I'm ready for you. So I ended up being pretty good at networking and getting people jobs. A project that I had just finished was it was more of a request from Weta Digital that wanted to see Richard Taylor at Weta Digital wanted to see some leather work from a local leather worker that he had met at Comic-Con. So they turned it into a Wheel of Time shoot, and they could not get it off the ground. So enter me, where it ended up being like 300 people and multiple locations and custom made everything. And the idea wasn't really to show, that we can do canon. I knew we didn't own the rights, that we weren't meant to, it was never really meant to go to YouTube, even though it ended up there. Kind of a big fight about that. But it was really just to show off the craftsmanship and the artistry of the props and the leather work and the costumes and the swordsmanship, like the craftsmanship. It's more what it was about than anything. But everybody was excited because it was fantasy and I was doing it. And if I do something, everyone knows I don't have cheap ideas and I do things big. So, but it ended up being a pretty harrowing experience. From all of my love of The Wheel of Time, which I've read 14 times.
Oh my God. Wow.
Very emotionally attached to that series. It was a pretty negative experience, and it just sucked me dry and kind of broke me. And I'm not going to get into it, but I had taken a break from everything, Hollywood and film, and I was just done. So when Nate called me, I think he was trying to get me off the couch. He's like, hey, there's some musicians. You've been my film producer for all of our music videos. I know you like music. Maybe you could talk to them about some things and get off the couch, go do some things. So I met them, and my first impression was their music was amazing. The talent that these guys demonstrated blew my mind.
I was going to say, you just start with the copy of the book. How did you go from just having your copy to, where it is now and creating the soundtrack?
What I did first was I read the book, and because I do story development and screenwriting, I do that in my sleep. So I pinpointed on my first read through just the basic, this is our introduction to our main character, this is our all is lost, this is our midpoint, this is our turning point to Act 3. Here are some notable themes. Here are some notable visual symbols, etc. So from there, I just wrote our basic album, which is what we recorded first. And then we had about a year to kind of develop and add all those extra tracks. After our Kickstarter, we were like, okay, now we have no time, let's write it. But I was prepared for that. What I did after that was I would take a scene and I would basically storyboard it like I would like a director would do a storyboard. I figured out what camera angles I wanted, how long I wanted the track to be. Let's say this is a 3-minute song, I would break it down into sequences for my composers so it's not overwhelming to them. I'm like, okay, section 1 is going to be from the first 30 seconds. This is an overall scope of what's happening in this scene, so you know what's going on. The first 30 seconds, this is what's happening. And basically, I kind of break it down by ratio, because obviously people might want to read along with the book. It's not necessarily the intention, but if they do, not everybody reads at the same time. So how do you do that? I figured I'd just do a basic ratio like I would a script page. So you have this many pages, this many beats or lines before you have to have a beat in this scene. Then you have this many lines before you have to have a turning point in the scene before this action happens. And then this dialogue happens at this moment. So There's a lot of structure and kind of math that goes into it. But I broke that down and translated that into musical terms for my composer.
Yeah, it sounds like you almost took, like the beats of the story, or even like the paragraphs became like the bars of the music. Okay, so
Yes.
this is about this song, and then we translate it to that. And I think you guys have absolutely succeeded in capturing that essence of The Way of Kings, and it sounds like just a true collaborative effort. When you guys were recording with all these artists, were they starting to pick up the book as well, or you just give them that scene and they're in that immediate moment?
No, the artists that we worked with, like if you're talking about the performers, like the orchestra or the individual soloists and things, all they get is a piece of paper with a bunch of black notes and lines on it.
They have
That's
no
it.
context.
Yeah, no context.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't even stand in front of them getting ready to conduct and say, well, this is what's happening in the scene. It's literally just, look at what's on the page. So that's part of the composer's job, is to do, I guess, something similar to what Sae Sae is talking about, translating one thing into another thing in such a way that they'll take it, then we can give them these musical directives, make this feel this way, and a lot of it's really like technical details, add these crescendos and things here, these particular dynamics, or bowings for the string sections and different types of attacks and whatever, but translating all of that into the emotion that we want to hit based on what Sae Sae's given us, and for those of us who've read the book, also based on the feelings that we felt, as we've read. And so all of that technical stuff comes out with the feeling that Sanderson intended.
Often you'll see pictures of the musicians with a headset on one ear and then another where they can hear the music in the room. And what they're hearing is what we call samples. It's an electronic version of our song, so that they can play along to it and they can hear the whole song as it's meant to be as it's meant to be finished. And sometimes you can see them getting into it, and it's so fun when they're just like, when they're feeling it and they're just like, and then the slow bits where they're just like, it really is satisfying.
I wanted to ask you, Michael, when you were composing, what were the differences? Because you do have those songs that it just feels like You're in My Spot, for example. This is a scene being brought to life. But then you have something like Stormblessed, which is basically like the Kaladin anthem. What were the sort of struggles or differences between making like a theme song for a character as opposed to adapting a scene from the book?
Yeah. So there's a few different types of uses of music. If you're looking at a film, a lot of stuff is underscore. And, when you're doing a film, you're trying to kind of get out of the way of things like dialogue and other things like that, right? And so you do weave in, thematic material, but it's like, it's very carefully. When we have something like what we're doing with a book soundtrack where we don't have actual visuals and dialogue that we're competing with, then we're freer to explore that thematic material. So like when we're adapting, like a particular scene, we'll weave in themes, but there's other like tracks, like if you look at The Night's Radiant, that's not discussing, or that isn't relative to a particular scene in the book necessarily. That's the theme, and so we come up with something that we think can embody the spirit of this thing, embody the spirit of The Night's Radiant. But once you have that that thematic material, then it's a matter of, okay, now how can I take that and put that in service of the scene that I'm creating? How does that fit here? Okay, well, in The Knights Radiant, we had, strong horns, right, blasting out. But then in, like, for example, Thoth, in that moment, Kaladin has this realization about honor and justice and whatever. Like, it becomes more internal and more intimate. And so it's like, okay, we're going to take these horns, this theme, we're going to do away with the horns because this isn't like an epic moment. This is something that's sweeter and more intimate. And we're going to use a solo, 11-year-old girl to sing the theme. And so you make some decisions about, like, what does the moment call for? What are we doing with it? And how does that fit in? And a lot of that comes down to some of those technical details, instrumentation, what instruments to use, what tempo you're going at. Are we in an action cue? Are we going to do something that's a lot faster and epic? Am I going to layer a bunch of stuff together? Is this going to be like, the entire string and wind section going at it together? Because it's like, now we're doing something that's like carrying a bridge, and it's hard, and it's like, busting through stuff. So now we got to, like, it's everyone together, right? And so we kind of take that moment, I guess, if you would, and turn that into, it's all the orchestra working together. So it's really all about taking the moments and figuring out what the technical details are for that, and how to express that, in an emotion.
That brings me to what I did want to ask about, because you listen to this album, you get transported to Rosha, you're on the Shattered Plains, you're with the Alethi, you might visit Shallan briefly, and then the King's Wit starts playing, and you're like, oh my god, what just happened? And that's exactly what happens every time Wit shows up in The Way of Kings. I'm like, oh, okay. And it really does feel like Wit has kind of broken into the studio and he's recording now. And even once like the beatboxing kind of gets implemented too, I was like, damn, this is something else. So I wanted to hear the story of this track.
This is one where I, again, not being a composer for the soundtrack and not really wanting to overstep, I knew what this song was going to be. He's from a different time and place, that's very obvious. It's not even much of a spoiler with him. It's very clear that he is not from here or when. So it would make sense that he would use some, while he's hazing people at the door. It's like at a party, like you would see, I just picture people at a bar, or at a club trying to get in. This guy's like hazing them. So he would be using techniques that are just he's outsmarting them, and he's outwitting them, and he's seeing if any of you are up to the challenge and can pick up what he's laying down. And so to me, I've been looking for different sounds for that, and I knew I wanted sort of a lounge kind of a feel with a bass and a cello, simply because the bass represented Dalinar strictly trying to keep the beat to the music that's playing on the Prince's Island. And he's, then Navani comes in all seductive like, and is just like dancing circles around him and is flirting with him like crazy. And I'm like, these two instruments go really well together. But then when he gets to the beatboxing, I just thought, it's just fun. And he totally would. And it's almost like that middle section where he starts to beatbox is when it's the scene where Navani and Dalinar are speaking, where she's kind of flirting with him and he's trying to not flirt with her. And I just picture Wit, going like, you get this guy. Go for it. What's up. She's worth it, man. So I just picture him just interjecting a little bit, like, all right, I'll step back and see what you two are doing. I'll just keep the beat like, no, man, you got this. You know, like sort of musically do that. I could not convey that idea to any of my composers. They all thought I was insane when I said I wanted a beatboxing lounge flute. So none of them wanted to do it.
Well, even if the fans don't like it, Sae Sae, I think Hoyt would probably approve.
I think he would too.
And then we've got Rysn from that. Can you talk a bit about that, Michael? Like how you created that track?
Rysn. Well, sure. Yeah, I came right out of writing Honor is Dead. A little backstory. I never recognized it for the longest time, but I actually have like minor depression, and it took my wife pointing it out to be like, okay, that's what that is. I didn't, I never quite got it. But we went into writing Honor is Dead. I got into it. It was like deep and with every hours on end writing this track, it just pulled me deeper and deeper. So it was hard to write. Even the turnaround in the middle when things start brightening up, it still has some of that pain and whatever in it. And so by the time I had finished it, I was just like, do I want to write anything else? Do I just want to crawl up in a blanket somewhere, But we were under a deadline. It was like I had to come out, and it was Rysn. I had some ideas before about this. I want this to be this upbeat, happy thing, and we landed on something different, right? But our reference for this, and maybe you can tell when you listen to it, was Avatar. And there's some pieces of Avatar that just it hits me in the right way, and that makes me happy. And it was like I want to write that. And it was just the thing that I needed to pull me out of where I was with Honor is Dead. The vocalist, that's another thing I wanted to talk about, because Sae Sae mentioned, okay, who do you want, for the vocalist? And it was a lady by the name of Arilee Brighton. She had done the vocals on Ori and the Blind Forest. And that's another one of those that all just kind of
amazing.
Hooked me right there. Yeah.
Amazing.
So lovely.
That's a beautiful story. And it's amazing how what you're working on can just influence your life in such a profound way. And it's almost, when I think of Rysn, it's almost the opposite of her story, where she starts off actually quite happy and carefree, and then things take a turn for the worse, and she does suffer with a lot of, I don't know if you want to call it depression, but she has a lot of mental anguish. So it's interesting seeing the connections between you and her as two people as well.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the Kickstarter. I want to maybe start talking about that a little bit. And I wanted to ask, how was the experience working on Kickstarter, and how was it getting feedback from the fans, and how much were they able to influence the album?
Man, it was a lot. Running a Kickstarter.
We didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah. It was a lot more work than, maybe you'd think up front. And we went all in on it. Sae Sae produced this big video. We shot all kinds of footage for it. Some that we didn't end up using, some that we did, but it was a big deal, getting visual effects and everything on it. But all of the work that went into even just figuring out what are the tiers that we're going to do, what kind of things are we going to offer, and what pairs well with a soundtrack. I mean, nobody's heard of us before. What are they going to be interested in? We're going to tell them book soundtrack. What's a book soundtrack? It's like we've got all these considerations, but we have a lot of money we need to raise. But then you asked about connecting with fans over it. We did have a lot of people who would write in and get a lot of feedback. Okay, these things are awesome. These things, not so much. These are the types of tracks that I'd be interested in hearing. And
I was just going to talk about connecting with the fans. It was so important. Sander fans, as you know, we are a special breed. There is a uniqueness among, right? Yes, we're all a little hardcore, which is totally acceptable and not weird. In fact, it's encouraged. So, but the friendship and the fellowship that comes with it, and the genuine support of wanting to hold each other up. I was coming from a place of extreme Hollywood professionalism, show the veneer, especially as a woman. You kind of can't really be vulnerable. You have to be, cookie cutter perfect. And whenever I deviated from that, I felt, I'd get death threats and things like that. So, but this whole album allowed me to access a part of vulnerability and honesty with my work that I hadn't connected with since I was very young, when I was on fire and kicking down doors and taking names and people knew who I was. And it was really nice to connect to that, and such a pleasant surprise.
I did want to ask about your new project in working with Brent Weeks, your new album adapting The Black Prism, and just how is that going, and is it a different experience to your experience with The Way of Kings?
Yeah, it's definitely been different. The agents have given us a lot of freedom in some ways. Like not quite as hands-on as Brandon's agents have been, which has been fantastic. We aren't working, directly with Brent, same as Brandon. Like that makes sense. He's got a lot to be doing. He's a really busy guy. But as far as the creative side of things, we've been approaching it maybe on steroids, I would say. We talked a bit about themes, and in Kaladin we had like 5 or 6 themes. You could count them on your one hand. Yeah, Sae Sae sat down and broke out like all of this thematic stuff that she wants to do with it. Here's a theme that shows up here, but we need to weave it in here and here, and it's got to come in this way, and all of this. And at first, like it was like this massive list of things, and so
It was a lot, but it's definitely a lot more. But even on top of like the musical themes, we're also thinking about like sound effects as themes, or as things that will show up again. Like we've got these ideas for magic. Sae Sae, maybe you should be telling some of this. All right. I gave you the floor. Just wanted to say before I word vomit. Here are my notes for The Black Prism. So there's just a little bit in here.
Whoa.
I will say, I don't know if you can see just a few things in here. I learned a lot from Kaladin. I use the same techniques that I do when adapting anything. So what those blue notes are, that is the manuscript. That is the book itself, written chapter by chapter, so that I can make sure that I can reach the canon of the book. The yellow parts are the story structure, like I would do for screenwriting. So we have our introduction to our main, our subplot, midpoint, all is lost. We have multiple points of view, so I do that with a few different people. And then the little pink parts are chapters or sequences that could use music. Brent writes like a screenwriter. He doesn't know that he does, because he's gone on publicly and said he doesn't know how his stuff could be adapted. I'm like, oh, sweet summer child, you are not a filmmaker. Like, this is a gift from God. It is so well written. There is so much in here. The structure is impeccable. And his use of language, I always say in screenwriting, if it's not a setup or a payoff, it's a distraction. And in screenwriting, your distractions better be setups. Like, don't use them, or they won't make it past development. We do not have time and money to indulge in meandering and world building. That's a lot of a struggle that we have with adapting. I've adapted 7 things of Brandon's now, and that's an issue. It's not just length isn't the issue. Length isn't really the problem. It's content and order of information, and when things are presented, that's a bit of an issue. But the way Brent writes, it is tight. every word he uses is on purpose.
Plan is to launch to fund this through Kickstarter again as well.
Yes.
Can you tell us what you're allowed to, or what you're able to tell the audience about that so far?
Yeah, so we're looking at May. Right now we've got a target release date of the music for August 1st. So the Kickstarter will run in May, and I'm currently thinking that'll be like mid-May would be the launch. We're focusing more on the Black Piper, more on what we do.
We're connecting more with the craft of the craftsmanship of what we do. We learned on Caledon that people were there for us and for our success. And we're on Discord right now, and we're trying something new where people were like, if you want to see us make this thing, come on over. You can, not just behind the scenes, like come see when I word vomit all of my ideas and my theories about the script and visuals, like what camera angles, like what will I be doing and how does that inform this song? Like that's where that is. And then when we're talking about marketing and Kickstarter builds, now we've got fans that just come over and hang out and they talk to each other. They started a book club where they're reading for the first time or rereading the book. And we've also got a section that has become very popular where it's just like music feedback, and anyone can post there. We've got people on our team saying, hey, I'm doing this for a video game, what do you think? And then we've got fans. It's like, hey, I wrote this for Mistborn, what do you think? It's just on my piano. And we all give feedback to it. It's just like unadulterated access to Hollywood people saying, oh yeah, I can listen to that for 30 seconds and give you some feedback.
Yeah, that's amazing. I don't know if people realize how rare that is.
Right?
It is going to be a blast. I know from the talks that Sae Sae and I have had that it's going to blow people's minds what we're going to do with it. It's going to be incredible. So I would encourage all your fans to come and sign up for the newsletter so they can be ready when we hit the go button.
Your mind is going to be blown with just how specific we are getting without being, again, over the top. So hopefully, I am taking a lot of risks musically with kind of combining some modern sounds with traditional, like what you would, it's not going to be Lord of the Rings. It's not Lord of the Rings. It's more
which is good. It's good. It should be its own thing. I mean, I'm getting excited for it. I haven't even read the book. I just know, it's the colors. It's the colors fantasy series. So yeah, I'll probably have to pick it up now, and I can't wait to hear what you guys do with it. Thank you so much, Sae Sae and Michael. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you guys, and all the best with the new album. And just thank you, truly, for what you've created with Caledon. I'm in love with this album.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's so good to hear.
If any of you guys want to follow the Black Piper or get in touch with them, I will put all their links down below. Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that inside look into the process of the Black Piper and their album Caledon. Thank you so much for watching something a little bit different from me. I'll be back soon with more lore videos and things like that fairly soon. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you've been well. See you in the next one. Bye.